Chapter 2, The Best of the Best. Rock and roll hurts. So, to summarize, it started out like everyone else's. While I was working alone, calling clients on my own, meeting with them on my own, traveling to publications on my own to submit ads, and so on. It seems like you're doing everything yourself, but on the other hand, you're only responsible for yourself. Over time, there were so many clients that I couldn't cope on my own. I started hiring employees. You already know that. But what you have yet to realize, when you run a business in such a service area as advertising sales, a lot of the result is tied to the team. How exactly they communicate with customers, how quickly they handle orders, etc. All of this affects the efficiency of the company. As a manager, I had a new serious task at that moment, to build relationships in the team in order to get results together, in the form of many satisfied customers and earned money. However, I did not know how to manage people properly at that time. No wonder, I only had experience of working in Extra M, but I certainly did not want to repeat their policy of relations with the team. I had to find my own way, and that's a separate song. The company was rapidly expanding, moving to new offices. And during these moves, of which there were many, the smoke was billowing. We packed all the luggage ourselves, loaded and, on the contrary, when we got to a new place, unloaded and unpacked our belongings. We disassembled and assembled tables, pulled wires, crimped cables, while searching for instructions on the internet. And when it was necessary to unload a multi-ton truck with a large circulation of leaflets and booklets, no one stayed aside, managers, designers, general director. Got a free pair of hands? Get down to business. I will not get tired of praising our team. The people back then were all like a selection, hard-working, not afraid of any work, and they still are. As they used to say in the old days, the party said, "We must." The Komsomol answered, "Yes." Only those companies succeed where there is not a single random, i.e. lazy and unscrupulous, person. Medor is and has always been proud of its employees. Yevgeny Vorobiev, a former employee of Medor, now a successful entrepreneur. I remember this company as young and daring. We were not afraid to take on any projects, even seemingly impossible ones, if we saw real financial profit in them. Thanks to this, the company probably grew because there was no fear. We were not afraid to take risks. Like many agency employees, I started out as a sales manager and left when I was head of the media advertising department. I got to Medor through Headhunter. Nothing unusual, I found a vacancy, responded, called, and came for an interview. After that, my journey in the company began. If memory serves me correctly, I was only the fourth employee in the agency at the time, or something like that. I had experience in advertising. But it was my work at Medor that gave me all the knowledge of sales. Oleg showed me exactly how all the processes take place in person, and the training took place while I was working. That is, no theory, straight into battle. My salary consisted entirely of a percentage of sales. Of course, at the first stage it came out small, because I had no established client base. But it was honest. I realized that everything depended only on me. This is relevant even now. I can advise all new recruits to the Medor agency to work and study. Here are 2 elements of success that will help you grow professionally and earn more in this company. Constantly learning new things and doing the work you have to do on time. That's the whole secret. But not everything was as rosy with our team as it might seem from the outside, despite all the talents of its members. Moves, as a rule, stretched for a whole day, or even several. And as it happened, after settling in at a new place, we set the table, and it was not without alcohol. There is an important nuance here. When the company was small, joint meetings with the team brought us closer together. We all kind of bonded even more at such meals, we became almost relatives, you know. Is it necessary to write separately that since the parties gave only positive emotions, they became more and more? Vladimir Sokovsky. The collective grew to 6 people, and the partying began. Everyone was young, including the general manager. And if we successfully completed a really big project or just moved into a new office, why not celebrate it all? It started with going out after work to eat shawarma and drink beer, and we often worked late, until 8 or 9 in the evening. Then we started to organize small holidays, especially in the summer. We took the table outside, celebrated the birthdays of our employees and their children, professional dates, or even just Friday. The more people we had, the more we had fun. We had a tradition of going paintballing on New Year's Eve and so on. When we became more than 20 people and the team had to be divided into departments, a certain invisible line was passed. And all these friendly corporate parties began to have negative consequences. As it turned out, there are people who should not drink alcohol at all. A small dose was enough for them to go off the brakes and start turning paintball into some kind of counter-strike, shooting without rules. Some of them didn't go to work for a week or two, they were ashamed of what they had done. But it was not as bad as drunken fights in the department, occasionally, but it happened. For example, at a party, an employee of one of them accidentally touched a person from the other, and immediately there was a wall-to-wall fight. And there were other times when people simply crossed all the boundaries. Someone fell asleep right in the toilet, and someone heard that in the neighboring office hidden cognac, and broke the locked door. That's property damage. When everything was possible and everything was encouraged, people were constantly trying other shores. Can I drink more? Can we do it in the office? Can we smoke in the office? And so on, until every possible prohibition was violated. Plus, the line between supervisor and subordinate is blurred a bit. When you have been drinking with the director for 2 days in a row, you can say to him, "Well, we had such a good time yesterday, why are you bothering me with this report?" That's not the case, of course. Elisaveta Spiritonova, financial manager, financial analyst, employee of Medor since 2011. I remember that door story. We had a birthday party for one of our employees, and he was actually given a cognac, an expensive one at that. He left it in our office at first, but then he took it home. And another colleague, who now no longer works with us, did not know about it. He was such a big guy, not pumped up, just big. So, I come in the morning, I pull the door, and it falls right on top of me. Luckily, I got off with a minor scare. Then the guards made fun of me, "Why did you break the door?" And I immediately realized that everything happened at the corporate party, because of drinking. I don't miss those times at all, by the way. Yes, in my 20s I wanted to go out and party. But now there are other interests. I personally went into powerlifting. I became a master of sports in powerlifting. I pull 115 kilograms. Maybe that's why my brains think better. Physical activity has a noticeably better effect on results than alcohol. I completely agree with Elizabeth. Those times are not very nostalgic for me either. And as for brains, our financial analyst has always been very good at it. Of course, Elizabeth's professionalism has only grown over the years. Perhaps sports really helped, but we should not forget about the experience gained. So, again about those feasts. At first, I went along with the sales managers, who were usually the main mass entertainers, because they are the breadwinners who bring money to the company. At first I put up with drunkenness, romances and love triangles on this basis. It seems to be going well. But one day it became clear that the situation with the rock and roll style of work was getting out of control. That's why I myself became one of the first to stop attending such parties. I set an example for the team. And although the parties gradually stopped, the echoes of those bacchanalia were still heard within the walls of Medor Agency for a long time. The habits of the old school employees had to be burned out with a hot iron. Vladimir Sokovsky. How did these endless celebrations end? Vladimir Sokovsky, not immediately. At first, the owner of the company himself began to be less present and drink less, but this did not have much effect. Often people, on the contrary, relaxed even more, because Big Brother is not watching. Then, when the employees became about 30, instead of global drinking began small, by departments and offices. But soon some of the most active drinkers were fired. Somehow it so happened that the main instigators of drunkenness were not very clean in professional terms. Someone stole something, stole a client from a colleague, received a kickback, or the discipline was lax, there were low sales. Therefore, the core, so to speak, drinkers were partially disbanded, but someone, however, was persuaded to get coded, and soon all this party life itself came to naught. To see an unfinished bottle of whiskey standing right on your desk at work has long been unrealistic. It's time to cheer up. However, problems with alcohol seem child's play against the background of what happened in 2014, when the United States imposed the first major sanctions on Russia. This happened after the annexation of Crimea. As you may remember, America was then supported by the EU countries. Overnight, Russia ceased to be an investment-attractive region for foreign businessmen. And what is more, our country began to look like an aggressor to Western businessmen because of its foreign policy. Many foreign companies felt that the smell of fry, and immediately withdrew their budgets from the advertising market. In other words, the number of advertising agencies remained the same, but there was much less money on the market. The outflow of Western capital as a whole caused a crisis in our country, stopped building factories, curtailed niches that depend on investments of Western investors. So it is not only the advertising industry was in the ass, pardon the frankness. But we were the first. In any crisis, many companies in principle reduce their budget for promotion. It's not a matter of being alive, as they say. At that time, a saving idea appeared, to hire an executive director. It looked reasonable. It was necessary to share your functionality with an intelligent specialist who would help not only to keep the business afloat, but also, why not, to bring it to a higher level. I appointed Olga Demidova to the position, and she started developing the company. Olga is one of the best managers I have ever seen. In addition to being a great mom and an amazing wife. The team was crazy about her. Olga rallied her department around the principles of respect and mutual support. All in all, she was the best candidate at the time. Olga Demidova, executive director of Medor from 2007 to 2018, is currently raising 3 children and working as a marketing director. I was invited to Medor through Headhunter. More precisely, the agency was still called Idea at the time. I was interviewed by Oleg Krutko and Ilya Akhmedov. Initially, no one took me seriously, as I looked 20 in my 25 years. I was given a competitive environment. They hired other managers and literally pitted us against each other. But I managed to convince the management quite quickly that this approach had a negative impact on the performance of the division I was managing. In general, it was difficult to join a structure with 2 completely different managers, each of whom had their own goals, opinions, and desires. But I managed to do it, as you can see now. I was engaged in self-development in different directions, and the company gave me such an opportunity. It is important for me. I can't work in routine. I liked the Medor team. After all, as you know, the best attract the best. When people believe in you, you can teach them, guide them, help them, support them. As a result, you become an authority, an example, a leader, a person with whom they feel comfortable working. You inspire them, and that gets results. I was able to work effectively at a high position and still have time to take care of my family. The secret is simple. The most important thing is self-organization. On-time work and clearly defined tasks help to achieve the desired result. But at some point something went wrong. I believe that I made a mistake in giving Olga motivation in the form of a small salary and a percentage of the incremental margin from transactions, rather than net profit. Olga, in turn, hired technical executives and managers who were supposed to develop each of their own areas. However, in practice, this new system turned out to be unviable. Turnover was growing, but net profit was falling. In general, at the end of 2014 we increased our staff by 50% and at the same time went into a concrete minus in terms of money. These are the results for 12 months. The losses then amounted to almost $500,000. By and large, it was my fault. Olga did what she could for the good of the company, but my management decisions ruined everything. Although I worked like Papa Carlo all year long just to keep the company from closing down, I allocated myself a small salary and reinvested a serious part of the turnover into the business. But for some reason there was always not enough money. I had to invest another sum in the company again and again, and this against the background of the fact that the costs of office fees, payroll and everything else were increasing almost every month. When I saw the figures for the closing of the financial year, it was like a boot to me in general. I'd had a vague sense for a long time that something was clearly going wrong. It manifested itself in the fact that I had stopped feeling interested in my business, and it, in turn, had stopped bringing me both income and drive. And when I saw the exact numbers, I was stunned. Yes, the revenue is higher, the margin is higher, but there was no income as such. Yeah, we recruited people, bought them equipment and everything. And in the end they gave so much that the profit from the orders was eaten up by the funds for the provision of these projects themselves. It was necessary to urgently develop and take anti-crisis measures. It was about the banal survival of the agency. The salary fund had to be significantly reduced at once. At meetings, looking people in the eye, I told them that I had to temporarily reduce their salaries by 30%, asking them to be patient and to get into the situation. We also reviewed the number of personnel. We manually sorted out who is actually responsible for what and what the results of everyone's work are. We kept the best and gave the rest recommendations for new employers. I agree that these are quite tough measures. But once again, we did not expel any strong specialists, we managed to retain the backbone. Now I remember that at that time I came across some business article on the internet about the fact that the number of office clerks is growing regardless of the company's profit. That is, the apparatus increases by 10 to 15% every year, and it makes no difference what the business results are. Perhaps I agree with the author of that article, as I have observed a similar effect myself. So, in a certain sense, the situation even, one might say, benefited. Sometimes it is worth it to drop a little ballast. Those who came to the office to sit quietly for 8 hours reading a book went home. And those who produced results stayed and succeeded. I am proud that there are still people in the team who went through that crisis with me then, and all the others, too. I admit that at that time I was terribly depressed. I thought, why do I even need this business? It brings nothing, only losses. Usually it was like this, I earn considerably more than I spend, plus I always managed to put something else aside. Maybe someone will say that I don't know how to spend money. Remember, all those Rolexes and Bentleys are not for me, but I know for sure that I like to earn it. And now yours truly began to have doubts. I even seriously considered selling the business. My mind was spinning, what price am I prepared to part with my business for? The figures changed one after another. First $500,000, then $250,000, then it came to $100,000. In short, at the peak of the crisis, I was ready to say goodbye to the agency for $50,000. At that moment people appeared who offered such a sum for my business. It seemed, goodbye, Medor, and hello again. I think you can guess that if we had sold the agency then, this book would not have seen the light of day. Speaking of literature. At the time, I was impressed by Tony Hsieh's Delivering Happiness. From Zero to Billion. He wrote about his entrepreneurial journey. The author founded Zappos, to sell shoes online, which was bought by Amazon a decade later for $1 billion. The model looked appealing. Maybe it's easier for me to start a retail company too, just to buy and just sell a quality product. Providing services makes businesses dependent on people. Working with goods seemed more reliable. Everyone buys food, clothes, gadgets, etc. Did we choose the wrong direction from the beginning? Like hell we did. Now I can confidently say that I was very lucky that the offer to buy my business never came to a deal. At some point I gave up and started to save my business. I had to revitalize the company. My observation is that over time, we all get a little more relaxed at work. There is a certain degradation. For example, a valuable specialist is working, he is passionate about his work, he likes the tasks he solves. But he has a child, one, then the second. He no longer shows as much diligence and enthusiasm at work as before. Family matters take away energy. The man asks to hire an assistant, to shift some of the work to him. Then he needs another assistant. And at some point it turns out that for this valuable specialist 3 assistants are already working, which, although they fulfill the tasks, but, of course, worse than he would have done himself in the best of times. And he just sits in his place and plays solitaire. This approach could not be tolerated any longer. When a difficult period began in our company, we began to analyze and count closely, to look under a magnifying glass at what was happening in each area of our activities. Let's say that in one direction per month we closed deals for $1,500 of conditional profit. But salary expenses amounted to $4,500. I say to the head of the direction, "Buddy, look, the profit is only $1,500, but the cost of production is 3 times more. This is not how business is done." Then the man himself sees everything and offers to give up assistance. He promises that all the work he delegated, will do himself. He remains on a salary of $1,500, the direction brings profit, the same $1,500, therefore, in the minus we do not go, the debt does not accumulate. That's the minimum. And then go ahead, act in the plus. In the next month, the profit already grows to $4,500, and the cost of production remains at the level of $1,500. Mikhail Pavlov, a former employee of Medor, is an entrepreneur and SEO in the Global Marketing Group, a Medor franchise holder in St. Petersburg. When I talk about Medor, I always note that there is a traditionally developed culture of high bonuses, of working for a percentage. Accordingly, you can earn unlimited money. I think this creates an excellent school of survival. This is especially effective in crises, of which there are many in business. In such an environment, strong leaders are born, tops who earn $10,000 or more. And some become owners of businesses, create their own projects. The other side of the coin is that when managers are fired, often new client managers fail to build similar relationships with customers, and the latter leave, which means that a manager's salary can easily drop by $2,000 to $3,000 simply by the fact of firing one of the specialists. I have been in this situation many times. I have learned many good lessons, and now, when I am an entrepreneur myself, I try to avoid such situations. At the same time, I fully agree with Oleg's policy, that we cannot buy everyone, make managers our slaves and bind clients to us on some rigid contracts. The market is free, managers and clients are free too. I believe that man was created to live in a world where he can work with any clients, in any countries, and not to fixate on one market or another. Crises are temporary, but relationships with people are forever. Of course, the schemes of work described here are a bit simplified, purely for the book. But in general, it was just the way it was, a lot of work for all employees and every penny counts. This gave us the opportunity to determine the break-even point in order to take timely action and steer the company away from the dangerous line. Hey, accountant, throw out the accounts. I will never tire of repeating that the most important thing is people. No matter how hard times come, if you have a reliable team around you, everything will work out. The opposite is also true. When you are the only one trying to solve problems, you can't count on serious results. That is why our doors have always been, are and will be open for talented professionals who are looking for opportunities to realize their potential. Andrei Sidorov, an employee of Medor from 2009 to 2010, is currently an executive director at Lighthouse, www.donpilafon.ru, an online lighting retailer. In 2009, my friend Maxim Gavrilyuk somehow ended up at Medor. I was looking for a job at the time, and he suggested that I try my hand at sales. He recommended my candidacy to an HR specialist. I came for an interview, and I seemed to like him more or less. I was told, let's give it a try. The agency at that time seemed to me to be quite good, well formed, not a small one. It occupied 3 floors, and they put me on the 3rd floor. We had a separate spacious office. The atmosphere in the team and in the company as a whole was more than favorable to professional development and making money. I liked the fact that my colleagues were young and interesting, trying to achieve something. A young team, focused on results. Everyone wanted to earn money, to prove themselves somehow, and they tried to do their best in their skills. Team building at Medor has always been at the highest level. I remember when one of the managers sold a large project and we all went to celebrate this event with a paintball game. We had a great time. I worked at Medor for a short time, about a year or maybe a little less. I was an ordinary manager, my duties included cold calls. I can't say it was my thing. But I had good relations with the team. I still communicate and am friends with many of my former colleagues, including Oleg Krutko and Vladimir Sokovsky. It was a great stage in my life, a necessary one. Without the experience I gained at Medor, I probably would have hit a lot of bumps in the road at my new place of work. Also, as I wrote, I made acquaintances and friends with whom I was able to build long-term relationships. It was an important stage of development. By the way, now Maxim Gavrilyuk and I, with whom we have been friends for more than 30 years, run a joint business, an online hypermarket of lighting products called Dantlafon. Maxim told us more about our project in the previous chapter. One of the things that gives me particular joy in working on this book is the fact that we are indeed still in touch with many of our former employees. No one has burned bridges, and we have all carried warm relations through the years. The human approach and the desire to help each other have always been with us from the very beginning. That crisis was passed by a young, united team, focused on results. Although some of our former colleagues saw the youth of the team not as a virtue, but just the opposite. Well, this point of view has a right to exist. I pass the floor to Ivan Dyanov, who will tell us more about it. Ivan Dyanov, an employee of Medor in 2007 to 2009, is currently the founder and general director of Top Dog Fitness and Rehabilitation Center for Dogs, http://topdogfit.ru. I have an advertising degree. And also practice again, a lot of work in different roles in advertising, television, newspapers, agencies. Then I came to Medor, because I had both experience and a client base that was quite large. Even then, the agency tried to keep up with the times. The company's goal from the beginning was to introduce new technologies, make exclusive offers with their help and ride it out. That's when I realized that you can make a lot of money on exclusivity. And we had a strong, well-coordinated team. Of all those who worked in our fourth department, there were a couple of people with a well-developed advertising scheme. With its help it was possible to fulfill the monthly norm of orders, even if nothing much is sold. In general, it was interesting to work at Medor. Oleg Krutko always organized briefings and master classes. Every Monday morning began with a discussion of the sales strategy, which was invigorating and set me up for work. What else I liked about the agency was that managers did not compete with each other. There was no point in that, because no one was winning anything from each other, no one was taking away a piece of the pie. On the contrary, people interacted, helped to develop the corporate spirit, which was supported by all sorts of events. I still have photos from one of the corporate events. We played poker dressed up in the mafia style. I think it was a birthday party for Medor itself. But not everything was so smooth. I lived in Dolgoprudny and spent 2 hours just to get to the office and back, although this is, of course, a problem not directly related to working in the agency. But the biggest disadvantage, in my opinion, was the infantilism that was in the air. It manifested itself first of all in hammering on some working moments. That's right, a large young team. People could sit around, for example, playing Counter-Strike in the evenings. If you do non-work things during working hours and your bosses give you that kind of relaxation, it's liberating, it's relaxing. At the moment I don't let myself do that. By the way, I have my own business now. I am the founder and general director of the Top Dog Fitness Center for Dogs, as well as a rehabilitation center for dogs, one of the top ones in Moscow and the Moscow region. Here it is, the very exclusive I mentioned. A hobby that grew into a profession. I even received a second education on purpose, sinological. Now I am trying to develop further in this sphere. I worked at Medor for a year and a half or 2 years, something like that. I am still in touch with them. I order goods and services from the agency to promote my own business. I keep in touch with former colleagues from our department. It's cool when you had such an interesting company in your life, where you could try everything at once and participate in the organization of all processes. I didn't just sit at a computer, I was engaged in full-fledged managerial activity. I was literally moving around a lot. I had to expend a lot of energy, but I gained a tremendous amount of experience. I agree, youth is not only energy over the top, but also some carelessness at times. However, it passes with the years. Over time, we have noticed a correlation between the speed of business development and the average age of the team. In their 20s, they were working like hell, from morning till night, burning with enthusiasm. And when the age approached 40, people relaxed a little. Yes, many people want to leave early on Friday, go to the dacha for the weekend, be out of reach for work issues after 8 o'clock in the evening and on holidays. I can understand them all, it's normal. Anyway, the focus of priorities has shifted over the years. Now I'm sure it's right to recruit a young team to grow the business. But, of course, older, experienced professionals should not be excluded from the field of vision. You can learn a lot from them. Still, youth is youth. Apparently, then it, or rather, the energy it gives us, and infused us with the strength to pass all the tests. The troubled times, by the way, affected not only the reduction in the number of employees and their salaries. For example, if earlier paper cups for coffee were in abundance in our office, then during the difficult period we had to give up even them. Some employees began to resent it. They did not like the fact that they had been deprived and their usual benefits had been cut back. This, by the way, is about the fact that line staff in general, except for a few people, usually do not think about the amounts that make up the operating costs of the company. The manager assumes that he has, say, contracted with a client for $5,000, his salary is $1,500, so the remaining $3,500 is left to the company. And it turns out that the greedy owner is pocketing that money for himself. That's not how it works. A person does not take into account the payroll of the accounting department, financiers, cleaners, advertising managers, couriers, workers who mount billboards and assemble exhibition equipment. And then there's the tax burden, the advertising costs the company incurred to get bids from customers, and so on. In other words, from this $3,500, which the employee earned for the company, is immediately deducted quite a percentage. When we tried to explain to employees how finances are actually distributed in the company, many people thought they were being deceived. That is, some people didn't want to listen and were simply convinced that they had to endure certain hardships just because management didn't appreciate them or show them favor. But you have to talk to the team anyway, even if you know that there will be people who disagree. And first of all, it is necessary to communicate with those who hold leadership positions and are responsible for subordinates. In general, we introduced the following practice. We called one by one the heads of structural divisions, showed them the financial plans of their departments and how they were fulfilled, or not fulfilled. Then we explained how the crisis situation was affecting the company's profits and the market as a whole, showed them current profits and losses, development prospects, and asked them how we would proceed. Some managers offered harsh solutions, let's fire this one and that one. Others offered more democratic options, we will temporarily cut everyone's wages, but we will save the team completely. This is an important point from the point of view of company management. Judge for yourself, reforming business processes can be initiated by the owner of the company, top management or middle and line employees. When changes come from below, most often employees themselves immediately understand their responsibilities and how to reorganize their work algorithms in order to get better results. No wonder, these are the people who know the work processes thoroughly from the inside. If you let initiatives come down from above, you are likely to encounter sabotage, and then it's all over. The only problem is that in our personal experience we have noticed the following: only a small part of people are really ready to take responsibility for what happens both at work and in life in general. Most people find it easier to blame everyone around them, management, ex-wife, children, because of whom they cannot change the circumstances. In general, such people consider the cause of their failures and inaction all around them, but not themselves. Surely you, dear reader, have such characters among your acquaintances. Let me give you a working example. A long time ago, accountants used to work with wooden bills, and there were no other devices to keep records. Then the market changed, the first calculators appeared. then computers, and after that specialized programs like 1C. The software already allowed collecting large amounts of data and automating them. And now imagine, at one time you hired an accountant who uses only invoices. Well, nothing, the main thing is that the business goes on. But times are changing, and you suggest that he switch to a calculator for starters, thus somehow optimizing his work. And he nods his head and agrees, but stubbornly continues to move his knuckles. Technology is improving even further. The employee clearly does not have time to do his work the old-fashioned way, he needs additional assistance. The person does not develop, does not move forward, he is afraid to try new systems. What if it doesn't work out? As a result, there are no results, enthusiasm is below the plinth, and profits are falling. The accountant almost openly expresses his negative attitude to what is happening in the company. Question: and who is to blame for this? The boss. And from all sides. The hired employee is sure that the manager, and only he, is the only source of all the troubles. And the owner from his bell tower should realize that it was necessary either to insist on the transition to new technologies at any cost, or kick the ass of such a negligent accountant, since he is so clumsy that he does not want to master not the most complex tools and keep up with the times. As already mentioned, not a single employee who showed really good results in our company left during the crisis period. We kept all the valuable ones. But those who expected to just sit it out with us until they received a more favorable job offer, left the company themselves. In addition, employees who had their own additional business, in which they actually put their heart, energy and strength, and in our company at the same time saw only a safety cushion, also left. Of course, all the opponents of progress, like the accountant from the example above, also left. And when only the most hardened ones were left in our ranks, it seemed that we started to push back from the bottom. However, this seemed also had its price. We hire the best, period. For some time I lived in South Africa, Canada, USA, Australia, in the former British colonies. I wanted, to put it simply, to get out of the country for a while, to distract myself and at the same time to see how things work abroad. But perhaps I'm not starting from the right place. Perhaps I'll digress a little and tell you how exactly I got interested in traveling. Once, about 12 years before this book was written, I was browsing social networks and came across a picture of a friend of mine rafting down a river. Interesting. That same summer I went rafting in Karelia, and a year later, the same place, on the river called Uksa. That's how, thanks to the site, Odnoklasniki, I got involved in camping life and extreme. And they also say that looking through the news feed on social networks is a waste of time. Not always. Then I wanted more. So I went on an autonomous 10-day tour around the Kola Peninsula with a great team. By day on a catamaran, at night in a tent. All this time I was without cellular communication and internet. That's what I liked most of all. And willpower has nothing to do with it, it's just that in those parts of the world there's no network coverage at all. When I came back, I immediately started making plans for the next trip. Now I wanted to conquer the mountains. Elbrus was closed at that moment, sort of because of the terrorist threat, so I went to Kazbek. It was November, with snow up to my waist. It was a tough climb. Since then I have been going to the mountains regularly. Kazbek, Elbrus, trekking on mountain peaks. No beaches in Turkey or Egypt. Only new accomplishments and new proofs of my own importance, and you already know what a man needs them for. Besides, I got acquainted with cool guys from Ukraine, who led tours to the mountains. One of them, Vyacheslav Gerard, the founder of the portal vsevigori.com and a very cool guide himself, told me about his trip to Iceland, one of the most beautiful countries in the world, according to him, on a par with Norway and Nepal. I decided to start my acquaintance with the amazing corners of our planet. And, having given the necessary orders, I left for a couple of weeks. You know the joke that Iceland is the only country in the world where you have to take out a loan to pay for lunch? Well, that's not far from the truth. For example, even the coffee at the gas station was noticeably expensive. After the trek we decided to hitchhike around Iceland. We went to see lagoons and waterfalls. One day we got a ride from a guy in a pickup truck. He had a shotgun in the cab and an ATV in the trailer. Our traveling companion was on his way to hunt deer. Said he worked at a gas station. Obviously not a simple gas station attendant, probably a manager, but still. Looking at this man, who looked absolutely happy, I thought, Oleg, you are an entrepreneur from Russia, but for some reason you hesitate to buy coffee at an Icelandic gas station. You don't have an ATV or such a cool pickup truck, and you don't go hunting, unlike the employee of the same local gas station. And this is despite the fact that I live in the most mineral-rich country in the world, which is not the case with Iceland. There are almost no natural resources here, and what is there, even trees are imported here, they don't grow their own. Geysers, not wood, are used for heating private houses. So why does an employee of an Icelandic gas station live better than an entrepreneur from Russia? I felt bad for my country, so I decided to continue traveling around the world to see how other countries live, and maybe learn something useful. One problem, I spoke almost no English, only, London is the capital of the Great Britain. That's how 4 times a year trips to language schools abroad took the place of mountain hiking and river rafting. I started with Malta, then went to America and Canada. For example, I spent 1 month in Toronto. I took as many English lessons as possible. In the evenings I went to the gym with local guys, to Thai boxing and wrestling, and never missed a chance to test my language skills. Canadians, by the way, are very tolerant of newcomers. They are ready to repeat the same thing 10 times in a row if they see that you don't understand English well. I spent a total of 9 months in the USA, living in different cities. I realized the main thing: if you set yourself the task of learning English, you must stop communicating in any other language. Accordingly, on my trips I avoided Russian speakers as much as possible, and there are quite a few of them in Toronto. Anyone who really wanted to speak Russian, I offered to call me when I got back to Russia. I spent my time mostly with Colombians, Venezuelans, Frenchmen, and Swiss. And what was going on at Medor at this time? In brief, nothing good, but we will talk about that a little later. Now I will answer one of the main questions in general: what is there in Western countries that we do not have? My main discovery is that the legislation there is really tough, and everyone around them observes it rigorously. Everywhere you go, there is complete order. And after a relatively long experience of living abroad, I looked at what happens in Russian companies, including ours, and realized that there is a mess going on here. And yes, it needs to be dealt with. The first item on the list of things that need to be fixed is personnel policy. I will tell you more about my hiring system. We hire only the best specialists in their field. To begin with, we assign a newcomer to manage one specific area, without adding a million additional cases on top. For some time we watch and analyze his results, how many projects he completed during this period, whether he managed to establish working relations with clients. We can see at a glance whether a person is effective in his place or not. Here is an example of one such story. I will pass the floor to one of our former employees, Boris Volodin. Boris Volodin, an employee of the Medor agency in 2009 to 2012, is currently head of the advertising department of Sushi Wok, the largest international takeaway Pan-Asian cuisine chain, https://sushiwok.ru. I already had some experience in advertising, although not in a full-service agency. By and large, I came in without the necessary knowledge, but Vladimir Sokovsky did employ me. I was paid 25% of the profit from the projects. In the first month my salary was $85, in the second month, $330. I was nervous and scared, and I thought, well, that's it, it's time to start earning normally, otherwise I'll be eaten here. The others seem to be working well, but I am not doing well. I either can't make it or just have no luck. I pulled myself together and in the third month I bombed. I earned $3,500 net. And in the fourth, as much as $7,000. That furor and my jubilation I will remember forever. I was waiting for a miracle, and it happened. However, miracles have nothing to do with it. The fact is that Medor's leaders were constantly training their employees. The agency has well-developed mentoring, not just, they gave you a phone and you can do what you want. Vladimir, as my direct supervisor, gave me a lot of advice. Oleg also helped me. If he saw that I was stalling on a certain task, he would say, "Let me explain to you what the problem is." The main secret of my success is simple: I didn't give up, even though potential customers sometimes sent me straight to the mother lode. I took it calmly. Maybe a person has some problems at home and releases negativity on others, it doesn't matter. The main thing is to continue, with diligence and perseverance. Patience and labor will overcome everything, as they say. And that rule works in sales to this day. Push to the last and get your money. Even if you do not fully believe in your success. Believe it when you see the coveted sum with 5 zeros on a piece of paper from the accounting department. I left the agency, Medor, with a tremendous experience, which you cannot get in any institute. By the way, all domestic, standard training programs are based on books written abroad, which means that in many ways they are not applicable to the Russian market. That is why young specialists who have only just left the institute are often not employed in their specialty. Those who do find a job still have to learn anew, from their own experience. It is difficult. And yet, whatever happens, don't give up. After all, in companies like Medor, the team always helps you adapt and understand what is really going on in the market now. Boris is one of those people who are constantly looking for themselves and trying new things. This is a great strategy if you want to stay in place in this life and keep pushing the boundaries of your personal possibilities. Boris's professional career confirms the idea that a talented person will always and everywhere find a, well-paid, use for his skills. Boris Volodin. When you work at Medor, you are invested in. The management's position is, we are professionals, and since we are doing this business, we have to be the best in it. This rule applies even when employees leave for other areas. I can say about myself without too much modesty that I am a professional, and I became one thanks to the Medor agency. I am often invited to other catering chains for top positions, but for now I plan to stay at my current place of work, at Sushi Walk. By the way, if a person leaves Medor, it doesn't mean that our work together stops. For example, the company where I am responsible for advertising cooperates with Medor, and quite productively. For a long time now, my former place of employment has been the advertising contractor for my current place of employment. It may sound a bit unliterary, but it works without fail. Therefore, the conclusion is that it is beneficial to work with Medor in any case. If you are a current employee, you get experience and skills. And if you are a former employee, you can easily become a partner, because it is a pleasure to recommend Medor, knowing the attitude of the team to the quality of services. I have a lot of jobs under my belt, and with each new one my position and salary became higher and higher. Therefore, I would like to take this opportunity to once again thank everyone who has worked and is working at Medor for the opportunity to grow and constantly develop. Not a bad career, right? However, you can make it without leaving Medor. True, we have an unspoken rule in our company: we do not employ those who have more than a year's experience of working in government structures, the police, the judiciary, and similar areas. There are no rigid arguments here. It's just that all our experience of labor relations with people from the categories above is negative. All of it. Perhaps they are not bad as individuals and specialists, but I personally and my team usually fail to find a common language with such people and establish work. Plus, in my subjective opinion, people who came from the system are inactive. They are used to the fact that initiative is punishable and it is better to keep their suggestions, ideas and opinions to themselves. I also think that the existing system, which is a sin, in some cases literally sets up employees to be dirty on their hands. And our company has a strict principle: zero tolerance for lying. For lying, we immediately dismiss, without any options. Let's say that a fire inspector does not take bribes as a matter of principle. But at the same time he knows that his colleagues do not shy away from such monetary gifts. So, he if he sees and keeps silent, contributes to the crime, right? Is it a lie? Or some would say it's a silence, an unspoken truth. To me, the unspoken truth is the same as a lie. And in any case, when a person does not report a crime, he becomes an accomplice. In my opinion, this is unacceptable. Once again, this is all purely my personal opinion. But it is supported by the experience of interaction with controlling organizations, representatives of which sometimes come to us with checks, and from time to time, some comrades, clearly demonstrate the desire for personal enrichment. To be fair, let me give you a positive example. What is our approach to hiring in action, i.e., how exactly we choose the best specialists? In 2012, we decided to develop our mobile exhibition business. Surely you have seen, say, in McDonald's mobile stands with vacancy announcements. In the professional environment, this type of advertising is called X-banner or spider. Another type of mobile construction, roll-up, it is a frame with a stand and a cassette from which the banner with advertising is unscrewed. At that time we sold this kind of equipment in relatively small volumes and wanted to significantly increase the realization, say X10. But there was no one within the company with this kind of experience. What to do? We started looking for a specialist on the market who would take on this topic and organize everything on a turnkey basis. The personnel department received a task: write a query in Yandex, exhibition equipment, and make a list of the top 20 companies providing services in this direction. And then call them and ask who is responsible for sales. Go out to this person, call him for an interview. If quite simply, let's hunt the best of the best. To do this, find out how much this person receives at the current position, and immediately offer him $1,000 more. The scheme worked. We hired a strong pro, Andre. He came to us from one of the top exhibition companies, which Yandex then gave out the second on the right query. In short, it was probably the most powerful specialist from the leading organization. Andre came into our office, and by the energy he radiated, it was immediately clear, a salesman had arrived. The man immediately asked what working conditions we offer, because he already works in a cool company. I answered, not without irony, if everything is fine at your previous place of work, why are you wasting your time meeting with us? It turned out that he had a salary ceiling there. That is, he received a fixed amount of money no matter how much he exceeded the plan. After talking to him, I realized that his competencies were really worth more than the salary he was being paid. As I had intended earlier, I immediately offered him $1,000 more, plus no salary ceiling. That's for starters, and then we'll see. I think you realize that if the principle of hire the best is used in a company's work on a regular basis, it requires a certain budget. It is also obvious that we never save money on employees if we see that the business will benefit from it. Change the world or revolutionize the industry are good slogans, of course, but we believe that the most important thing is that a person is paid decently. If an employee has no money, he or she is obviously not in the mood for high thoughts. And vice versa, when a person is well paid, he or she has a certain freedom. This is our logic. And the strategy worked. Andre brought a lot to our company. The man proved in practice that a high-class salesman can masterfully package a product. He used to say, I only need to be at arm's length with a client to sell him something. It's like a judoka, who made a grab and then confidently leads the fight to victory. And I would be glad to write that Andre is still in the ranks of Medor, but, unfortunately, it is not so. Why? Because in addition to professional qualities, there are also human qualities. They manifest themselves over time, and some of them I had no desire to put up with. For example, we had different views and understanding of what customer service should be. In our company, the requirements for customer satisfaction were much higher than what Andre was used to in his previous job. Simply put, we always strived for a level of service after which the client would write a thank you letter or leave a positive video feedback. The opposite point of view was that the service should be provided within the framework of the contract. From now to now, and that's it. Perhaps the client was counting on something more, or found small faults, and they should be corrected. But within the contract the work was done, and that's the main thing, we stop. Not our option, because the problem is that the customer's happiness is not regulated by the contract. For example, you ordered furniture, but it turned out to be chipped. The contract with the manufacturer says that small chips are allowed, up to a certain size. But who reads the contract thoroughly? As a result, you are not happy with the purchase and swear at the seller with the last words, precisely because they shove a paper in your face and say that formally everything is within the fixed agreements. Will you contact such a company again and even more so recommend it to your friends? I think the answer is obvious. We at Medor believe that when working with clients, money is not the most important thing, reputation is worth much more. An obvious thing in our opinion, which for some reason not everyone agrees to accept. But in any case, we parted well with Andrei Anatolievich. Now he is the owner of an exhibition company with its own production, his business is going well, and as far as we know, his clients are quite satisfied. We, in our turn, are also happy. A new direction in our company was born and grew thanks to our cooperation. Continuing the topic of hiring, I can't help but remember this. There is an anecdote or a parable about Henry Ford. Something went wrong in his factory. He invited an outside craftsman to take care of it, and he walked around and looked at it. Then he took a sledgehammer, banged it on the machine with a swing, and bang, immediately everything worked. The foreman hummed, turned to Ford and said, "That'll be $10,000, sir." By the way, at that time this amount, taking into account inflation, was equivalent, probably, almost $1 million in our time. Ford responded by asking if it was too expensive for just one blow with a sledgehammer. The specialist parried, "I've studied all my life to know in what situation where to hit." And Ford paid the bill gratefully. So, when you hire a really cool professional, he does his job quickly and efficiently. At the same time, his services usually cost about twice as much as an ordinary specialist. Only such ordinary specialists, you will need 10 people to solve the same problems, as practice shows. And they, by the way, still will not achieve the same result. So even from a mathematical point of view, the strategy of attracting the best of the best is 100% justified. Elizaveta Spiritonova, financial manager, financial analyst, employee of Medor since 2011. Everything is complicated in our company. You can be in one position and be doing a lot of things, like, for example, when I came to the position of assistant office manager, I started sorting out documents, of which there was a huge pile. Gradually grew up to checking payroll, paying bills. Now I work with financial data and I still check payroll. How much was paid, how much was spent, by what account? What was shipped, what wasn't? On top of that, I also pay my own bills. I've gotten used to this multi-stop arrangement. It has its advantages. For example, they let me go to the gym in the morning, it's very convenient to start the day with physical activity. But in the evening I can't even leave early. We go home at 7, 8, and sometimes even at the beginning of 10. There is a lot of work, but if it is fun, there are no problems. Oksana Novokshanova, Medor employee in 2017 to 2018, currently a professional Instagram tagger and coach. I've been working in sales since 2009, half of the time as a sales rep. At the time when I got a job at Medor, which was 2017, I already had a serious accumulated experience. But I had never worked in the advertising segment before. I had just arrived from another city and was looking for a job in the capital. I came for an interview at Medor and was accepted. At first it was scary, because, even though the directions are roughly the same, the essence of the work and responsibilities are still different. I had to understand advertising equipment and services. It was hard to communicate with customers on the phone, because as a sales representative I always conducted transactions in person. But I overcame the fear over time. First of all, thanks to my cool mentors, Vladimir Sokovsky and Tamara Gaeva. Although it was not only them who helped me, but the whole team as well. Even the couriers explained what and how to do to make a delivery, the girls who worked at the reception and many others. Literally everyone told me how everything is organized in the agency, from and to. It was difficult to see Oleg Krutko in the agency, because he was always busy with something. But at the time when the owner appeared in our office or at some meeting, he always tried to give time to each manager. Oleg knows not only all the employees by name, but usually even their clients. And he was also constantly conducting training for the sales managers. We would gather in the meeting room, the boss would give us useful knowledge and homework. Once, I remember, 3 girls, including me, won bouquets of flowers for doing them correctly. It was nice that here they motivate employees to learn not only in monetary terms. The tasks, by the way, were related to sales, of course. For example, one of them was to call customers again and offer them a new product. Calling is a problem for many people. It's very stressful. By the way, if you want to know how to overcome the fear of calling strangers, you just need to relax. Plus, every normal sales department has scripts of conversation to help. In general, I advise you to pay attention to the scripts. The agency provides ready-made ones, but not to use them mindlessly, but to adapt them. Adjust them to suit yourself, adapt them. I would also advise you to be braver. If something does not work out, turn to a mentor. Relax in any case and try to fulfill the plan, and not just for the sake of a salary. It should be necessary for you yourself, such a leveling up, a new level, after which you start to become an even stronger specialist. For a long time, we had a controversial position, not to hire former business owners in our company. We thought that people who blew their own business would ruin ours as well. But at the time of writing this book, there are already several people with entrepreneurial experience working in our team. And instead of sabotage, they treat our company as they once did their own. Having been in the skin of the owner, the employee understands what the company's real costs are and how other business chains depend on the timing of his part of the project. He also realizes that if the team meets the deadline, he himself will receive a serious reward. I will pass the floor to these wonderful people. Tatiana Krakova, head of sales, has been a Medor employee since 2020. I came to Medor from the travel business, during the pandemic, when this direction, in fact, died. Before that, I worked for myself almost all my life, and now I realize the advantages of working for someone else. The main thing is that here you can relax. You go home and you don't have a headache. You don't have to think, for example, about how to pay the rent in January, they've already thought of it for you. And at the same time you are allowed to develop and earn money. In short, I feel quite comfortable here, I have nothing to complain about. Nadezhda Pashkova, back office manager, has been a Medor employee since 2019. Before coming to Medor, I was a freelancer, actually a micro-entrepreneur. I know that this is what is considered nowadays, it's cool to work for yourself, not for your uncle. I don't understand this opinion, to be honest. I think that everyone has his own way. It's just a fashionable trend now, I guess. And so, not everyone is capable of working for themselves. Because many people, it seems to me, are not even given it to some extent. They need a boss, they need to be controlled. It's not easy in recruitment either, of course. In the agency at first it was scary, unfamiliar, incomprehensible. After all, a completely new market for me with its own rules, which I had to understand from scratch. But Oleg infected all of us with his eternal optimism and enthusiasm, which helped at first. We had no energy, and then one day you see an active manager, and you immediately think, why be discouraged? You have to live up to it. Then, when things started to go uphill, the fears finally disappeared. We were so immersed in work that there was no time for doubts. Oleg Krutko is a good manager, because he does not scold for mistakes and gives the team opportunities to develop. The most important thing for him is that an employee should act independently, strive for knowledge and improve himself. It seems to me that he and Vladimir Sikovsky complement each other. Oleg has a lot of ideas, he is a creative person. Vladimir guides him, helps him to bring these ideas to life, to link them to reality. So even if the former owner decides to sit with us for a while and wait for better times to get back to building his own business, fine, fine. But only if he or she is fully and completely with us. In any case, we consider it a good option when a person of high competence comes to us. Our rule is that every next specialist should be more experienced and smarter than the previous one. It's simple, every new employee who comes to us must be at least better in some way than either me or the head of the department who hires him. Thus, the company is always developing, not stagnating and, moreover, not moving in the opposite direction. And together with it, the employees progress, all together and each of them in particular. By the way, here is a short story about how it happens in practice. Anastasia Goryakovskaya, head of sales, has been a Medor employee since 2009. The story goes back a long time. In 2009, my colleague from my previous job, Olga Demidova, came to Medor, became head of the department and invited me. I came here and stayed for good. I came, by the way, not empty-handed. I brought with me a client base, which, incidentally, included PepsiCo. Oleg was especially pleased with her. At first she worked as a manager, at the same time was a buyer of souvenir products. Then she took an assistant, became the head of the souvenir production direction and continued to be a manager. Then she rose to the head of the working group, took an assistant for advertising. And slowly decided that it was necessary to grow even further and recruit a team. That's how I got into management, by my results multiplied by ambition. To be honest, I had goals, to buy a car, an apartment, to have a child. And all this implied that I had to earn a certain amount of money. I persistently went to it, staying at work, sometimes until morning, working on weekends, fully participating in every project. And there are a lot of people like me in the company. My husband says that I am a workaholic. But he's used to it, and we keep on a balance. If I'm late at work, he sits with the child. But if I urgently need to take a day off during the week, the management meets me halfway. I don't get professional burnout because I always make a work plan and follow it clearly. This is my only, if I may say so, secret of efficiency. Over the years Anastasia has proven her high professionalism many times. We take this opportunity to express our gratitude to her from the pages of this book. If only everyone who comes to work with us were like this, our business would grow at a noticeably fast pace, but it happens in different ways. Unfortunately, there was such a case. In the office in St. Petersburg, where we opened a branch when we were more or less back on our feet after the crisis, the manager hired employees who could not surpass him in anything. That is, the newcomers were worse than those who hired them, professionally. And then the spiral spiraled. They themselves, in turn, did the same thing and also looked for people of the same level or lower. Perhaps the reason for this personnel policy is that some managers find it difficult to compete with new recruits. Or, alternatively, they just want to assert themselves at someone else's expense. And everything would be all right, but the company loses from this. And such a policy is manifested in the fact that here and there, on the vastness of the network suddenly pop up reviews from dissatisfied customers. As a result, in another financially difficult moment, because of the difference in views on further development and the use of official position to achieve personal goals, I had to part with that manager. The process was not easy either, conflictual and nervous. But, one way or another, all's well that ends well. And now it is absolutely certain that every next employee of the Northern Capital Office exceeds the competencies of the previous one. I will come back to this story later and tell you in a bit more detail how we opened a branch in St. Petersburg and what bumps we hit. In the meantime, I want to give you all the thoughts I have about hiring and HR policy in general. In the history of the Medor agency, there have been times when an employee joined us with a specific goal in mind, to save a certain amount of money or to wait out a year or two of crisis until better times. Or simply to gain experience, find clients and wait for a vacant position in a dream company. And it would seem that contacting those who do not see a great future for themselves within the walls of our agency is not very profitable strategically. But in fact, everything works exactly the opposite, once again, provided that the person is a real pro in his business. For example, we had a terrific internet advertising specialist with an original mindset working for us. He waited about 2 years for an attractive position at Gillette and went there, but the functionality that he brought to our company during his work, we still use to this day, years later. This does not happen very rarely. For example, a person intends to head Microsoft's development department in America. And he is waiting for a suitable opportunity, which is not currently available. That is, there is a strong pro, who right at this moment needs a job in his specialty, albeit temporary, but still. As I write these lines, we have an employee who has a green card, work experience and living in the States. While we're working on the book, he's getting a green card for his wife. So we all knew when we interviewed him that he was a temp. But we also understood another thing: if such a specialist on the American market costs $15,000, and he works for us for only $2,500, such are the figures on the Russian market, then at some point the person will leave, but his developments will remain with us. And this is extremely profitable for our business. By the way, the specialist's name is Mikhail Demidov, and he has become a full-fledged business partner in 2 of our projects, a sterilization plant for medical devices in Kaliningrad and an e-commerce hypermarket in the USA. Mikhail Demidov, a Medor employee since 2020, is now a business partner. I have been working with Medor since November 2020. The story was as follows: I have been working in the US for a long time for an American company, but for family reasons I returned to Russia and started looking for a job here. On Headhunter, I found a Medor vacancy related specifically to American topics, e-commerce project manager for the US market. Just what I needed. I worked in the office for a little while, 3 or 4 months. I liked the team, cheerful, friendly, mostly young guys and beautiful girls. Then Oleg and I decided to move our relationship in another direction, to a partnership arrangement. Since then, I am not quite inside Medor. I do some projects on partnership terms. What I liked about the agency is the constant collection of feedback. It's a pleasure to work with Oleg, the manager, who is always on the phone, available, ready to discuss new ideas. There are no bureaucratic hurdles, live communication, dialogue, process. I believe that such openness is a big plus for the company and a great merit of Oleg and Vladimir. And in general, I can note one more important aspect: a company is not the same as a company. Medor is one of those where everything happens rapidly. And any employee who is considering joining the agency or is already on the staff should be prepared for the fact that he or she will be required to deliver results, fast and noticeable. You need to grasp the essence of the projects at once, not sit, delving into the task for months and thinking about something distracting. Here you need to clearly understand that you came to work and bring something useful to the company, not just sit in the office 8 hours a day for a tick. Fortunately, the process of immersion and adaptation of employees in the agency is well established, I judge from myself. Older, more experienced colleagues will always help, show, tell, and answer all my questions. Of course, a newcomer can make mistakes, but at the first stages it is normal. A person learns to work in a system, in a team, with a particular product. Let's say he misspelled the name or wrote the letter wrong, it happens. Although the management reacts quite sharply to gross unprofessional mistakes. And that is correct. If you call yourself a professional, but you make schoolboy mistakes, you bring losses to the company. Such employees are quickly forgiven. Moreover, there are scripts for most situations. If you are given an instruction and you don't follow it, it's your responsibility. Isn't that logical?